And if you were to look back over the more than a decade that we have done this, most of the books deal with social justice, poverty, racism, education. They deal with issues of human need. And this book, Give People Money, subtitle, How a Universal Basic Income Would End Poverty, Revolutionize Work, and Remake the World by Lowrey. This book is really about a big, whopping plan. And it's not a new plan, but it is gaining speed partly because of two major factors. The technology apocalypse on the way and the techie people who are recommending the universal basic income. By the way, if I get into your head, UBI stands for Universal Basic Income. So if I come out with those letters in an acronym, it's Universal Basic Income. Now, the book is also about how giving people money in places already where there is a great amount of poverty is a good plan on how to help them get out of poverty. And there is a lengthy chapter, especially in the book, about what is done in India and experiments, and they've got a couple of other countries with experiments, and I'm not going to elaborate on that, but I'm going to summarize one comment on it right now so you can understand this. The dilemma is, if you have money to give poor people, how do you get it to them? Now let me say that again. The dilemma is, if you have money to give to poor people, how do you get it to them? And you don't carry it in suitcases. And many of these people live in villages where there are no banks. And so it appears in the book that one of the ways that this is an idea whose time might be coming is that an inexpensive cell phone also is a money recipient in parts of the world. And so that's something to kind of put in the back of your mind before I get to the handout. Now, what would you do if you had $1,000 a month guaranteed in your hand or in your phone or in your bank account every month for the rest of your life? And you get it. And what would happen if you had gotten that when you were 18 and 19 and 20? $12,000 a year. The idea is that that is enough, number one, whatever you piece together in the other stuff you're doing, to raise you above the poverty level. Notice again the key subtitle, this would end poverty. And the idea is that this is enough money that it would end poverty in the sense of the people under the poverty level would rise above it, almost universal. And so what would happen with that? The issues are many, and so I think I'll just start. And normally I start in the back of the handout with stories. I could tell you the one story. It is an overwhelming story. It's about a family. There are other stories in the book, but it's about a family where everybody is working and they never get ahead. They never get ahead. If you work at minimum wage, you are going to be under the poverty level. And one of the things that I learned in this book, I don't remember reading this before, but now my eyes are open to this, is that in the past, the people working at McDonald's were all teenagers. Now they're adults. And I'm started paying attention, and I'm looking at the younger adults and the middle-aged adults and even some older adults that I'm seeing working at low wage, forgive the term, menial jobs. And so that's a new insight. And by the way, I don't remember if I said this a minute ago, Larry James calls this, Larry James is the CEO of CitySquare. We're in the CitySquare Opportunity Center room. Larry James calls this the most important book he's read in the last 2 years. So he skipped the illustrated history of professional wrestling. That would have been the most important book. But this is the most important book that he's read for the last 2 years. It is a very good book. All right, I'm on the front. This is a little more classroom than usual. Here we go. What is the point of this book? Technology will take many, many, many jobs away from humans. I have just presented at my other event, the First Friday Book Synopsis, a book called AI Superpowers by Kai-Fu Lee. And that book says artificial intelligence is going to take away jobs. This book says artificial intelligence and technology and robots and software, they're going to take away jobs. Jobs are in jeopardy, especially good jobs are in jeopardy. The artificial intelligence, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. A universal basic income, UBI, is a potential solution to the problem for all the people. This idea has a growing fan base of serious, respected, knowledgeable advocates. All right, that's the point. Why is this book worth our time? Number one, this book presents an honest look at the threat technology brings to work and the workforce. In other words, this book explains that many, many jobs will likely be lost to new disruptive technology. Number two, this book provides a sweeping look at many UBI experiments across the globe. There are people trying this out in places across the globe right now. Number three, this book explains why a UBI might be needed even now for the poorest among us. It's not just that it will be needed later, it's needed now, according to this book. All right. Now, for the next few pages, I've got direct excerpts from the book. When you see one in bold, I put it in bold. When you see it in a box in bold, I did that. So those are, I think, the most important. If you'll stay with me, I'm going to read along, and I'll tell you which ones I'm reading. Here we go. Number one, this simple, radical, and elegant proposal is called a universal basic income, UBI. It is universal in the sense that every resident of a given community or country receives it. It doesn't just go to the poor people. It goes to everybody. And so it goes to everybody. It is basic in that it is just enough to live on and not more, and it is money. It's income. It's not shirts or bicycles or soccer balls or shoes or hats or coats. It's money. And so we're saying, we're going to give you money, you make the best of it. And one of the things that the book deals with is, well, won't they waste it? Won't they buy alcohol? Won't they buy cookies? Won't they buy ice cream? Yeah, some of them will. But it turns out more of them won't than will, and it turns out, this is interesting, the more you can get the money into the hands of women, the more responsible they will be. So that's kind of interesting. All right. And by the way, that was discovered by Muhammad Yunus years ago with the micro-lending. They chose to lend to women because men wouldn't pay back the loans. So interesting. All right. Number two. In the past few years, with the middle class being squeezed, trust in government eroding, technological change hastening, the economy getting Uberized, that's really interesting, and a growing body of research on the power of cash as an anti-poverty measure being produced, it is vaulted to a surprising prominence. The idea of giving people money has vaulted to a surprising prominence, even pitching from airy hypothetical to near reality in some places. All right, I should have put number three in bold. Put a star beside number three. Mark Zuckerberg, Hillary Clinton, the Black Lives Matter movement, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. Now, just to humor me, circle the names Zuckerberg, Gates, and Musk. And I'll tell you why in a minute. These are just a few of the policy proposals' flirts, converts, and supporters. Now, why do I think it's especially important to pay attention to Zuckerberg, Gates, and Musk? Because they make their fortunes figuring out what technology is going to be doing next. They know better than any of us do. Are they right? We don't know. Are they nailing it? We don't know. But they're closer to knowing than we are. And they're saying technology is going to replace human workers. Now, Hillary Clinton and Black Lives Matter, they're coming more probably from a political or social justice or race issue. But these three are techie people. Number 4. Perhaps the most prominent argument for UBI has to do with technological unemployment. The prospect that robots will soon take all of our jobs. Economists at Oxford University estimate that about half of American jobs, circle that word half of American jobs, including millions and millions of white-collar ones, are susceptible to imminent elimination due to technological advances. All right, let me give you the range. In this book, there are people who are projecting, I don't know if you want to use the word predicting, but they are projecting that sometime between the next 20 years and the next 120 years. So it's a long range. Between the next 20 years and 120 years, the job apocalypse because of robot software and technology is going to hit. Now let's just pretend that it's 100 years off. Well, let me tell you something. We better start talking about that now. And if it's 20 years off, we better start talking about that way back yesterday. And I will tell you that I've read Human Plus Machine and AI Superpowers and about 4 or 5 others books that deal with this. And I think it is a consensus finding that robots and software are going to replace blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, all collar workers. So there's a quote that we'll get to in a minute. All right, number 9, and we're skipping a lot, so you'll want to read some of these on your own. About 41 million Americans were living below the poverty line as of 2016. We could end extreme poverty right now if we wanted to, said Michael Fay, Give Directly's co-founder. That's one of the entities experimenting with giving people money. And so we could end the poverty now. All right, top of the next page. Number 10, a UBI would end poverty not just effectively, but also efficiently. Some of its libertarian-leaning boosters argue, hello UBI, goodbye to the Departments of Health and Human Services, and Housing and Urban Development, and to the Social Security Administration, and to a whole lot of state and local offices, and much of the Department of Agriculture. And so I know some of you are already thinking, how do we afford to pay for this? Well, if you do it for everybody, they're actually, if we only did $1,000 a month, some people would end up getting less money. So there'd have to be some adjustments. But the reality is, if you did it for everybody, you get rid of a lot of agencies and bureaucracy, you save a lot of money. Save a lot of money. And some of the money already going out in the SNAP program and other programs of Social Security are part of this overall package. Number 11, just giving people money is a very natural solution. That's an important quote because it comes from Charles Murray, who is with the American Enterprise Institute, a conservative think tank. And he says, give people money. Number 12, protecting against a robot apocalypse, providing workers with bargaining power, jump-starting the middle class, ending poverty, and reducing the complexity of government, it sounds pretty good, right? Yeah, it does. All right. Now, Drop down to 18, and this is what they're talking about. There's a law in technology called Moore's Law. I don't have time to elaborate fully, but it basically says every 12 to 18 months, it's really about every 18 months, the cost of technology is cut in half. And that means it was cut in half after the first 18 months, and then the next 18 months cut in half again, and cut in half again every 18 months. And it gets smaller and better and faster. And so, look at number 18. The cost of the three-dimensional light detection radar that helps guide the car, this is a self-driving technology tool, has fallen 90% from its original $75,000 price tag in just a few years. So it's gone from $75,000 to $7,500. Now get ready. This quote doesn't say this. That means in the blink of an eye, it'll be at $750. And then in another blink of the eye, it'll be at $75. And then another blink of the eye, it'll be at $7.50. And then they won't even charge for it. So that's what this means. The amount of technology in cars has been growing exponentially. I drive a 2011 Chevy Cruze, which they quit making. It was the car of the year, and they quit making it. I was in a rental car in Midland on Sunday and Monday, and it was a new Kia something, cilantro or cilantro or I don't know, chili powder or something. Anyway, it kept making these noises, and I finally figured out it was telling me I wasn't driving in the middle of the lane the way I was. Now this is an inexpensive car. This is not an expensive car. And so that's really interesting. And so number 19, the result of that is taxis without a taxi driver, trucks without a truck driver, cars you can tell where to go and then take a nap in. I am ready. They are coming to our roads and threatening millions and millions of jobs as they do. I've mentioned here in this room before, the #1 job in America is driver of every kind. That's the #1 job in America. And so, number 20, it seems like an extinction level threat. So 21, President Obama, his White House estimated that self-driving vehicles could wipe out between 2.2 and 3.1 million jobs. Number 22, Elon Musk of Tesla has argued that the large-scale automation of the transportation sector is imminent. 20 years is a short period of time to have something like 12 to 15% of the workforce become unemployed. And that's what's coming. And again, he is building his future on that. Okay, I don't have time to read all of these. Look at number 26 at the bottom. In the 1950s, the big three automakers, GM, Ford, and Chrysler, employed more than 400,000 people in Michigan alone. By the way, in 1950, that's the year I was born, there were 152 million people in the United States. Today, 2019, I believe the figure is 340 million. We don't know exactly, but we think that in 1950, there were around 40 million vehicles. Now there is more than one vehicle for every licensed driver. And we don't really know the full count. So 400,000 people in Michigan alone building cars for those three automakers. Today, it takes just a few battalions with about 160,000 auto employees in the state total. Detroit's population has fallen by more than half since the 1950s, and you understand, less than half the workers, that's robots and software, with more than double the population and somewhere around 6 times the number of vehicles. All right, turn the page. I've got to go fast. Number 30. The robots are coming not just for the truck drivers, but for Wall Street traders, advertising executives, college professors, warehouse workers, and book synopsis presenters. It's coming. All right. Number 35, and then 37. The AI, artificial intelligence, got so good so fast. Circle that. You understand that while we are having this meeting, there is a computer with machine learning getting twice as good as we're meeting. I mean, it's relentless. Number 37. Artificial intelligence, neural networks, machine learning have allowed such technologies to become self-improving. Circle that phrase. They're getting better on their own. That's why they're going to really take over jobs. This is not a book about the Terminator. All right. Number 39. Researchers believe there's a 50% chance of AI outperforming humans in all tasks in 45 years and of automating all human jobs within 120 years. Wow. Number 42. Wealth and income might become more and more concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer. Inequality, already at obscene levels, might become far worse. When you have a husband and wife who pay $500,000 in a bribe to get their daughter into the University of Southern California, I got to tell you that the people in South Dallas do not have $500,000 to get their children into USC. So that's inequality. All right. Number 42, wealth and income might become more and more concentrated in the hands of fewer and fewer people. Inequality, already at obscene levels, might become far worse. All right, 44, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and other tech titans have expressed interest in the policy christened the social vaccine of the 21st century. That's UBI. A 21st century economic right. VC, venture capital, for the people. And Chris Hughes, a founder of Facebook, has plowed $10 million into an initiative to explore UBI and other related policies, something he's calling the Economic Security Project. The community is evolving as we speak, from a small group of people who say this is it, to a large group of people who say, hey, there may be something here. And so what's happening is the idea of doing this is spreading, and even though there are different kinds of experiments, it all boils down to we want to figure out how to give people money. That's what it is. Number 45. As it turns out, the idea of a UBI has tended to surface during epochal economic moments. So this is not the first time. And so I've got a bunch of quotes here. In 1516, Sir Thomas More had a version of this. In 1797, Thomas Paine argued that each citizen should get recompense for the loss of his or her natural inheritance by the introduction of the system of landed property. Quote number 50 in that box, Milton Friedman, the Nobel laureate, suggested the adoption of a negative income tax, which is a different way of doing universal basic income for the poor. Martin Luther King Jr. called for basic income and other radical universal policies to aid in the causes of racial and economic justice. Both the Republican Richard Nixon and the Democrat Daniel Patrick Moynihan offered support for the idea, and there is actually a subtle argument to be made that Watergate distracted Nixon enough that the idea died before it could take root. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. All right. Number 59. We no longer have a jobs crisis. We have a good jobs crisis. That's for today. So that you now have people who in the past, they would have worked in an automobile factory making cars, and now they are working at McDonald's. So that's one of the changes that has occurred. Number 62, at the national level, employment has fallen in U.S. industries more exposed to import competition. as expected, but offsetting employment gains in other industries have yet to materialize. Some good jobs are simply gone, and they are not coming back. So let me describe it this way. You've got a company, you want to make shirts. You know that you have to make a shirt at a certain price. If you made it with American workers, the shirt would be too expensive. The pay would be too high. So you send it to Malaysia or Mexico or China, and literally some of these plants move from country to country. As the wages go up here, they're still low here. You will gladly bring that plant back to the United States. As soon as robots can make the shirts for less money than you're paying the lowest wage worker elsewhere. In other words, that's the way it is. Because I want to buy my shirts on sale at a low price. And so do you. We've gotten used to it. Okay. Number 63. More and more older white people without degrees, academic degrees, are dying early deaths of despair. That's just a fascinating, painful look. Okay. Number 66. A few decades ago, companies began outsourcing jobs that were not related to their core competencies. And so you get a company that sells insurance, and they used to have employees who were custodians. Now they get rid of those employees and they hire a custodian company. The people cleaning the building now don't work for the insurance company. They also don't work for the custodian company. They work for themselves. They're independent contractors. And they don't get health benefits and other benefits. So that's what's happening. And so top of page 5, gone are the days of pensions, sick leave, and paid vacation for all. All right, number 77. This jumped out at me. After describing some of the difficulty of living in both India and the poorest parts of the Mississippi Delta, if you had to choose between living in a poor village in India and living in the Mississippi Delta or in a suburb of Milwaukee in a trailer park, I'm not sure who would have the better life. That was gripping. All right? Number 80. Everybody put a star beside number 80. This one's big. The author says, we believe that there is a moral difference between taking a home mortgage interest deduction and receiving a Section 8 voucher. The bottom line is the government gives money to both. Why is this one good and this one bad? All right? So number 79, I should have read that first. Providing the poor with the steps might mean seeing them as deserving for no other reason than their poverty, something that is not and has never been part of this country's social contract. Poor, not deserving; middle class and wealthy, more deserving, the way we've thought. Number 82 also jumped out at me. As of mid-2017, just 2 of the 11 states that made up the Confederacy had taken the Medicaid expansion, Louisiana and Arkansas. Of the 20 free states in the Union, all had taken the Medicaid expansion except Maine, Wisconsin, and Kansas. Turn the page. Number 84. A UBI would not act as a reparation. By the way, there's a new book, Reverend Britton, new book called Before the War. I heard the interview with the author on NPR today, and it's about how central slavery was to the North before the Civil War. It's really interesting. Anyway, a UBI would not at all act as a reparation, an atonement for an undoing of the decades and centuries of government policy that have led to the racial caste system that exists in America. But investment on the scale of what the government put into white families, white communities, and white schools. In other words, investment unimaginable in our current political climate, and considering the reputation given to different communities on the Hill. So here's what he's saying. We actually gave a lot of money to help white people. We put them in better neighborhoods, we gave them loans. The GI Bill was not available to black people in the beginning days of the GI Bill. We put a lot of money into white people, and so we made it unequal by our policies. So that's what it is. Okay, turn to the next page. I'm going to move quickly. At the top, this is a quote from the book and then a definition that I got from a dictionary. Why should we give people money with no strings attached? What I came to believe is this. A UBI is an ethos as much as it is a technocratic policy proposal. It contains within it the principles of universality, unconditionality, inclusion, and simplicity. All four of those words are worth circling. Those are really good. And it insists that every person is deserving of participation in the economy, and is deserving of freedom of choice, and a life without deprivation. Our governments can and should choose to provide those things, whether through a $1,000 a month, $1,000 a month stipend or not. What is a basic income? It is a periodic cash payment, unconditionally delivered to everybody on an individual basis without means test or work requirement. That's what it is. Everybody gets it, and if you are a bad person, you still get it. If you're a Patriots fan, we'll consider taking it away. And everybody else gets it. Okay. Let's start here. You've got people who say, nah, there's no actual threat. The technology worriers have always been wrong. The Luddites said the jobs are going to be taken, and they weren't. And so my phone was heating up. Couldn't figure out why. The Luddites said it's not going to happen. And the tractors came and took away the farmers, but jobs came along. So there's no threat. That's what one group of people say. Versus the other people say, hold on, this time really is different. And that's the key phrase. And this is a quote from the book. Still, over and over again, the writer said, I heard the worry that this time it really is different. All right, let's note. The techie leaders see the need of a UBI, and these are the people who make their living by predicting what technology will be able to do. I just really find this compelling. Here in Silicon Valley, it feels like we can see the future, said Misha Chellam, the founder of the startup training school Tradecraft and a UBI advocate. Isn't this interesting? They choose which poor village to help in Africa based on the roof materials from satellite imagery. And they say that's a poorer village than that village. And that helps them target their experimental locations. I just found that interesting. Why basic income? Here are the reasons. There are too many people living in poverty, but plenty of people with lots of money. Technology is about to make that number, people living in poverty, grow, and it will get worse, much, much worse. Not everyone can do the work of today already. Let me remind you something. My father-in-law lived with us the last 7 or 8 years of his life. He never learned how to use the modern remote. He was just out of his element. There's a story in the book about somebody trying to teach somebody, I think it was in India, how to use the cell phone to access the money, and they couldn't get it. And so people without modern skills have trouble. And so not everyone can do the work of today and will not be able to do the work of the future, and not everyone will be able to find any work, especially with the robots coming. And there are unfair exclusions to the possible work for black people and women. Black people get less help, women get paid less. There's a fascinating section that says, and this is really fascinating, when women start to dominate the field, the pay goes down. And it's a compelling argument. And it's one, I mean, I've read a lot of books about gender equality and inequality, and this was a new tweak for me. So that's one of the problems. And a different consideration, what about the lesser educated? I teach at the community college level. I got to tell you, I've got students who will never finish an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. They're not capable. I don't mean anything unkind by that. I just mean I can work with them and they're not capable. And remember, about 22% of people in high school will never finish high school, give or take. All right? And think about all the uncompensated work. And there's a section in the book where there is a woman living in a village who goes out and finds things in the forest and cooks it and washes with water in the creek, and then they describe her husband, and I got to tell you, she works much harder than he does. And he gets some money and she gets none. So one of the arguments in the book is the compensation for work that is work but not compensated. My wife quit work, took early Social Security to care for her father. We are too afraid to figure out what that cost us. But it was a lot. It was a lot. And I'm not resenting that. We're glad we could do it, and he was worth every bit of it. Larry, this is the book you said is the most important book you've read in the last 2 years.
Go for it.
All right. This, not that. The question should always be, would we be better off just giving this money away as cash? That's a quote from the book. In other words, give cash, not shoes. So there's a story in the book about Tom Shoes. A glut of Tom Shoes disrupts the business of local shoe manufacturers and shoe retailers, much as donated clothing from the U.S. has damaged the local retail trade in many African markets. And by the way, they found huts with multiple pairs of shoes that were never worn. So, good intentions of Tom Shoes, not the smartest approach. Give cash, not soccer fields. These are actual options. Give cash, not doctor visits. Cash actually helps with health more than paying for a clinic. That's fascinating. Problems implementing UBI. The first and biggest one is technology. There are places where we can't figure out how to get the money into the hands of the recipient. So phones are going to have to be the answer, but we're not there yet everywhere. How will we pay for it? Well, we can replace all of the giving money, Social Security, SNAP, etc., and that reduces the overall price tag of social programs. And so it's not that much more once you add all that money in to go to universal basic income. It's still more, but it's not total. We could raise taxes. We could find savings elsewhere, military budget. But the most intriguing section in the book is just pretend we're paying for it. We do that with the military budget, we do that with other things. The deficit has gone up, let's just pretend we're paying for it. And so print the money to give it away. Now, there's an interesting section on Maslow that basically says, and this is really interesting, there are enough people who find meaning at work that we're worried about where they're going to find their meaning. But there's also people at the bottom rungs who are trying to stay alive. So just an interesting aside. I'm taking too long. Next page. thoughts about the gig economy, the contract worker world. One thing is for sure, contingent workers get a raw deal. It's not, we're talking about Uber drivers and independent contractors. Not very lucrative, not at all reliable, and it is, in the world of employee engagement, utterly not engaging work. These folks are complaining that they're not even considered employees, they're not valued, and there's no way to get ahead doing this. They're not part of the team. I can talk about this, I won't. And then, it really might help in terms of dealing with money now if there was more union membership. And so that's a key element of the book. All right, I've got 5 lessons and takeaways at the bottom. Number 1, we really should consider the possibility of the technological apocalypse coming true. We got to pretend that could happen. Let's not get caught by surprise. The robots and software may take over the jobs. In fact, likely will. Number 2, we maybe should develop a bit of compassion for people who will not be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps in this new robot software technology world. They may not know how to rise above it. What are they going to do? Number 3, giving people money lets the people themselves develop some skills on their own with their money. They really don't squander it according to the tests that have been given, that have been run and are being run. And note, women are especially responsible as they receive and use the money. Number 4, good intentions are good, but smart answers should be followed. In other words, sometimes good intentions are not enough to make a bad idea work well. In other words, give people money, don't give them shoes or shirts or soccer balls. We've learned this, and the book talks about this, in our disasters. After the Houston hurricane, people wanted to send shirts and towels and sheets, and the agency said, send cash. We'll give them cash cards.
The president was throwing in paper towels.
Sorry. Yeah, that's right. Number 5, if we don't do a UBI, the consequences could be very bad. Give people money. Hope you found this useful. Thank you very much.